Mark Zuckerberg is building the Tower of Babel. That is my hot take. Obviously, I'm talking metaphorically. But the similarities between the Metaverse and the Tower of Babel in the Bible are really crazy, so I want to talk you through that. Make sure to stick around for this. First of all though, we need to kind of understand the Tower of Babel because it's really short in the Bible, but it is very, very significant. It casts a long shadow over the entire Bible. So we need to understand why it's so significant, understand all about it, before we understand how it relates to the Metaverse. So stick around for that, even though it's super interesting and you're going to love it. But before all of that, let me introduce myself. My name is Andrew. This is All Things Theology, the channel where I want to help you think biblically about the world, to not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, as Romans 12:2 says. So yeah, that's what I'm about. Tower of Babel. So the story of the Tower of Babel is found in Genesis chapter 11, but to understand it fully, we kind of need to know what God's original plan was for the Garden of Eden. So we need to go right back to the start, and we see that God's original plan for the Garden of Eden was that it was a temple. And temple in biblical thought is essentially a place where God and humans kind of come together, where they can be together. We've talked about this before on the channel. And Adam and Eve were to grow and expand the borders of this garden temple, and they were to progress technologically. That's how most scholars would actually understand that wee bit in chapter 2, where it talks about the good gold of Havilah and all these different natural resources. They were to progress technologically, and they were also to fill this garden temple with other image bearers, people who were going to rule the world under God's authority. But you know the story. Adam and Eve, they flip that on its head. They try and become gods themselves and rule without God's authority by taking from the tree, and so God kicks them out of the garden. And then the rest of Genesis, up until like chapter 12, just shows this downward spiral of humanity. The things just get worse and worse. God sends a flood, but after the flood, people are still really, really bad. And in chapter 10, we get a few details about this guy called Nimrod, who's really, really interesting. It says he is a mighty hunter before the Lord, and that he goes on to establish all of these cities, the first of which is Babylon. And this thing about being a mighty hunter before the Lord, that's not a good thing. Scholars would say that. They look at the Hebrew and they look at the context of Babylon and how it's depicted later in the Bible. Being a mighty hunter before the Lord, not a good thing. And so he builds Babel/Babylon. It's really unfortunate that both of those names are used because it kind of obscures the significance of Babylon going forward through the Bible. But the Tower of Babel is Babylon. It's the Tower of Babylon. If you're enjoying this video, by the way, please do remember to hit it with a like. That helps me out a lot. Thank you. So people have turned away from God's plan of building this garden temple city where God and humans dwell together, and now they're building their own city, and it's a city that is almost designed to make God redundant. It says that they want to make a name for themselves and build this tower that goes the whole way up to heaven, and they weren't just trying to dethrone God on earth by doing that. They're trying to dethrone God in heaven, to go up there and make a name for themselves separate to God. And the huge irony there is that they're using the gifts that God has given them. They're using their brains and their strength and their creativity and all of the natural resources that God has given them. They're using those things to mock God, and what they're creating, their desire, is a mockery of what God originally intended. And so this is what the Tower of Babel is about. This is what it means, that kind of hubris that we would say we want to be God. And that is where we get into the Metaverse. Because the Metaverse is supposedly going to be this whole new world created by Mark Zuckerberg and all his other executive people. They're taking this groundbreaking kind of revolutionary technology and they're making this augmented or virtual reality world. And just like the Tower of Babel, in a lot of ways, this is a human attempt to try and be God. So with the Tower of Babel/Babylon, people wanted to be God. That has not changed. We still want to be God. And smartphones, I think, to a certain extent, have fed this illusion that we can attain godhood, that we can be omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. And I reckon that the Metaverse is only going to heighten that illusion. We're made to feel omnipotent because, digitally speaking, we have total power over what people see of us. We have total power over how we portray ourselves. We can craft our own identities, and we're only going to have more power over that whenever people see us only as avatars. When it comes to omniscience, being all-knowing, we can just Google stuff. If we don't know something, we Google it. And in the Metaverse, that will probably be even easier to access. And then omnipresence, we can, in one form or another, be anywhere, everywhere at the same time. I'm sitting here, but you're watching me probably not in this chair. I could be texting someone who's in Australia and on a Zoom call with someone who lives in England, and fracturing myself across all these different places because smartphones allow me to be connected to all these different places. And that's not an inherently bad thing, but there are a lot of negatives that come with this kind of illusion that smartphones give us. And the negatives come whenever we kind of blur the lines of what our limits are. So We're fed this lie that we can just be constantly productive, that we can constantly work, and so we overwork ourselves. We push ourselves beyond a point that we're supposed to, and we overwork and we burn out and we get overstressed. Yeah, we can also come across whatever way we want, really, but we can be crippled by that pressure to portray or depict ourselves as something that we're not, or some sort of idealized version of ourselves. We've accessed all this information, but we're constantly trying to work out what's true and what's not true, because so much of it is fake. We become desensitized to all of these awful things that happen because we hear about absolutely everything. We're not big enough, we're not strong enough to carry the weight of all the world's tragedies, but we hear about them, and so we become desensitized to them. But we as humans, we have limits. We need sleep. We need to be able to say at times, I don't know. We need to switch off. We need to relax. We need to learn to be fully present where we are, instead of fracturing ourselves in a million different directions and a million different places. But smartphones feed us the lie that we can overcome these limits, and I can't even imagine how much stronger the illusion is going to be whenever it's not just a phone that you hold in your hand, but it's the metaverse. It's virtual and augmented reality. Now, you might have noticed that I left out one of the omnis there, and that's important because, like the Tower of Babel, we can believe that we are omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, but we are not omnibenevolent. Omnibenevolent means entirely good, and so even though there is some good in us, that good solely comes from God, but even though there is some good in us, we are going to use stuff for bad. You look at the way that smartphones have been used, yeah, we can use the internet and use social media to raise awareness of really good causes, or we can use it to teach and educate and inspire and encourage, but the human capacity to use the internet for evil is just unfathomable. The internet is where porn lives. The internet is where people are introduced to and learn how to commit crime and do terror. It's where people are radicalized. It's where cyberbullying happens. It's where smear campaigns happen. All of the world's evils are manifest in the internet because we as humans aren't good. And so what is it going to look like in the metaverse? What are all of these vices, all of these awful things? What are they going to look like in the metaverse? How much darker will that darkness be if it's not just something in your hand, but it's the way that you look at the world? Now, this might all sound like doom and gloom, because it is, I guess, but actually I'm sure that good can come from the metaverse too. Now, if you were to ask me, do I want to unplug the metaverse? Do I want it to never happen? I'd probably say, yeah, let's not go there. But whether I like it or not, whether you like it or not, it's coming. But they say it's 5 to 10 years away. Facebook, now Meta, have invested billions of pounds in this. They've taken a shot at this thing, and I imagine that it's going to go forward. There's nothing I can do to stop it. The reality is it's probably going to come, and so we need to work out how we can use that for the kingdom of God. We're going to need people who really love Jesus, but who are super creative in the ways that they can serve him. They're super savvy with technology, with internet, with metaverse. You look at the way that, yeah, YouTube has been used for evil, but also people use YouTube redemptively to share about God. And so we're going to need Christians to think deeply about this stuff, to think deeply, should we join in with this? Should we be a part of it? And if we are, how are we going to do it redemptively? But listen, whatever side you fall on this, whether you are for it, whether you're against it, God's not threatened. There's this amazing detail in the Tower of Babel story where the people are saying, oh, let's make a name for ourselves and build a tower up to heaven. And then in verse 5 it says, the Lord came down to see the building. So it's like they're trying to build a tower up to heaven, and he's like, oh, your tower is so puny, let me come down and see it. Like, obviously God could see it from there. I just think that's a really lovely poetic detail. The Lord Almighty is not threatened by our attempts to be God because we're puny gods.
Puny God.
That was the case in the Tower of Babel. It's going to be the same with the metaverse. God bless.